give them our Shaare Zedek warm welcome so that they feel welcomed here. So after reading through a list of 10 generations following Noah, the Torah introduces us, as Elizabeth said this morning, to Abram, who God tells, Lech lecha me'artzecha mi'moladetecha mi'beit avicha. Leave your birthplace and go to the land that God will show you. And from there, he will become a father of a great nation, a blessing, the recipient of God's covenant, and as we know now, the first Jew. But why did God choose Abram in the first place? And why did God change his name from Abram or Avram to Abraham, Avraham? The Torah never tells us what Abraham did that made him so worthy. At least with Moses, for example, we know that he killed the Egyptian taskmaster, he watered Jethro's daughter's flock. But Abraham, what did he do? There are various midrashim which fill the gaps of Abraham's early life in order to try to answer this question. You might recognize this one from a particular midrash from Hebrew school. The story of how Abram's father Terach was a manufacturer of idols. He opened the first idols are us, who once left Abraham in charge of the store. And the Midrash tells us that a woman came in with a plate full of flour and asked Abraham to offer it to the idols. Abraham took a stick and he smashed the idols, except for the largest one. And he put the stick in the hand of the largest one. And when his father returned and saw the broken idols, he asked Abraham what happened. And Abraham told him that a woman had come in with a plate full of fine meal and requested that I offer it to them. And one of the idols said, I have to be fed first. And another claimed, no, I have to eat first. And before I knew what was going on, they started fighting between them. One took a stick and smashed all the other idols. This story, this midrash, along with others like it, gives us sort of a snippet into Abraham's early life and explains to us how Abraham came to understand that idol worship was nothing less than foolishness, and instead came to believe in something far greater, and that, of course, is the one God. But was forswearing idolatry and believing in one God really enough to make Abraham the father of a great nation and to be the one whom all nations are now to be blessed? And the answer is no. That wasn't the only reason. The real reason God chose Abraham was because Abraham didn't just keep his newfound belief to himself, but he took action. He smashed the idols, and he even confronted his own father about his belief that idolatry was foolish. Abraham then went about convincing others that idolatry was wrong and that there was only one God. And it is that belief in standing up for what we believe to be true and not being afraid of teaching ethical monotheism to others has been the hallmark of the Jewish people ever since, despite how others, as we clearly see today among Hamas, Yimach Shimon v'Zichram, and its supporters, how much they despise us for that very reason. And that is why God made an eternal covenant with Abraham. Not only with Abraham, as we will see, but with his descendants. And then he changed his name from Abram to Avraham. The question is, why did God need to change Abram's name to Abram. What was wrong with Abram? Avram, what's wrong with it? Now and again in Hebrew school, we were told that the reason that God changed Abram's name to Avraham was because God wanted to put the letter Hey, or in English the H, in recognition of Hashem, of God, into his name. Recognition of Abraham's great faith and belief in him as a sign of God's promise. And that Abraham would be a blessing and a father to multitudes, because that's what Avram means. Not Avraham, but Avram means a father of multitudes. Av, father, Ram, multitudes. But I have to tell you something, that I believe that the reason that God changed Abram's name to Avraham, and he could have changed it to anything else he wanted, but he chose Abraham. And the reason I believe is that the H, in other words, making not but hum, changes everything in how Abraham would now be perceived. As I said a moment ago, Abram means father of many. But if you change by putting that H in the middle to hum, you now have Avraham. What does that mean now? Not the father of many, but the father of compassion. Avraham was not just the father of many. He was not just the father of the Jews, but Abraham, God demonstrates, was the father of compassion. He was the first person in the Bible, in recorded history for that matter, to teach us this trait. It is Abraham who is the first person to teach us not only the belief in one God, but also the importance of rachamim, of compassion, of kindness, of chesed. Abraham teaches us that faith in God and belief in God is nothing without that godlike quality. As what do we say on Yom Tov? We've just come off the high holidays. What do we say? Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun. A merciful and compassionate God. If God is merciful and compassionate, then we should be so as well. Abraham understood that exact belief and acted upon it. And that is why God changed Abram's name specifically to Avraham. And how did Abraham live up to that name? Well, Abraham was a man who was deeply concerned with the comfort and the well-being of others. He put others first. It is why his tent was always open. We're going to read that next week. It was open to any wanderer. It was why he gave his nephew Lot the first choice of which land to settle in. It was an argument between him and Lot. He said, take it. If you want that one, take that one. Even if it's bigger and better, you take it. And he called up an army to fight and rescue Lot when Lot was taken captive. It is also why, as we will read next week, he leaves his sickbed when he sees strangers in the distance, ignoring his own pain in order to show them hospitality. Achnasat orchim. And of course, Abraham demonstrated his compassion for those who probably least deserve it when he pleaded with God to spare the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Did they really deserve it? Absolutely not, in our minds. But in Abraham's mind, they deserved it. And so, if we were to really examine Abraham's life, we see that he did not live by faith alone. Not enough to pray all day long. You have to act on it. He lived and he served God by and through his actions. He was compassionate. He was compassionate to those who needed compassion. He argued and he fought, even with God, for social justice. And he fought with arms to defend himself and his family when they became threatened. And we as Jews today We as Jews today, if we are to live up to Abraham's name and the covenant that God made with him, we must live by his example. Here is one example of how we as Jews can continue to do so. There was a woman in England who we shall call Sarah Levine. She passed away at a relatively young age. And God had blessed her and her husband with great, great success. Success beyond what the average person can imagine. They were wealthy, but they did not spend their money on themselves. They gave tzedakah on a massive scale, within and beyond the Jewish community in Britain, in Israel, and elsewhere. When she died, among those who felt most bereaved were the waiters and the waitresses of a well-known hotel in Israel, where they often stayed. She had come to know all of them, where they came from, what their family situation was, the difficulties that they were going through, and the problems they faced. She remembered not only their names, but also the names of their spouses and their children. And whenever any of them needed help, she made sure that it came quietly, that it came unobtrusively. It was a habit that she had wherever she went. At the levaya, at the funeral, Sarah's husband told of how they had met. It turned out that Sarah's husband was older than she was and was a friend of her parents. She had some weeks free in the summer before the start of school, and Mr. Levine gave her a job. And one evening after work, they were about to join her parents for a meal. And in the street, they passed a beggar. Mr. Levine immediately reached into his pocket and gave the beggar a coin. And as they walked along the street, Sarah asked him for a loan, asked him to lend him some money. It was a fairly large sum for those days. And she promised that she would repay at the end of the week, when he paid her salary, she would repay it. And so he did so. He gave her the money from his pocket, and she ran back to the beggar and gave him all the money. When they joined up again, he said to her, why did you do that? I just gave him some money. And she said to him, what you gave him was enough to help him for today, but not enough to make a difference in his life. At the end of the week, Mr. Levine gave her salary. She handed him back the money to repay him for the sum he had lent her. And he said to her, I will accept the money because I don't want to rob you of your mitzvah of tzedakah, your mitzvah of giving tzedakah. But he said, there's another condition. And the condition is that you marry me. That you marry me. It was then, he said, I decided to ask her to marry me because her heart was clearly bigger than my heart. And throughout their marriage, they were responsible for many of the most important educational, medical, and environmental projects in England. And yet they always had time to know the names of the children, of the waiters and the waitresses at the hotel where they stayed. That, my friends, is one example of how we still live up to Abraham's traits of rachamim, of chesed, of kindness, even in today's world. And there are plenty of other examples, as you can surely think of, where individually and collectively as Jews, we live up to his other traits in fighting for justice and fighting for our own defense as well. And that is why we are the descendants of Abraham, because we still embody his traits of compassion, justice, and strength when needed. For Abraham and for us today, faith alone, while important, is not enough. But rather, it is faith in God combined with rachamim, with mercy and compassion towards man, which made Abraham the father of a great religion, and us the inheritors and the keepers of that still great religion. I'll repeat what I said earlier because the lessons of Abraham ring true today as Israel continues to fight an existential threat in Gaza, as 200 innocent people are still held hostage, and as the vilest forms of anti-Semitism are springing up around all of us across the world. So remember, Abraham lived and served God by and through his actions, as must we. Abraham was compassionate to those who needed compassion, as we must be. Abraham argued and fought, even with God, for social justice, as must we. And Abraham fought with arms to defend himself and his family when they were threatened, as must we, and as we are in fact doing. Today, we Jews, all Jews, must strive to live up to Abraham's name and the covenant God made with him by living our lives like Abraham led his. And may we be blessed to live up to the calling as the descendants of Abraham and always live by the values that he imparted to us, so that God promised all nations of the world will finally be truly blessed in a true peace. Shabbat Shalom.